I got a call, 6:15, whatever it was. Your dad's been shot. I got a hold of my father, and surprisingly, calm in the hospital, and by then I'd already gotten seen the video and sort of him coming up defiant in the face of actual fire. It was sort of amazing, and he just sort of said, hey man, you're the biggest badass I know, and because I genuinely believe that.
Not 72 hours ago, a 15-degree turn of his head permitted President Donald Trump to survive an assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. Now, we are all sitting here at the Republican National Convention, and I am sitting down for the first long-form interview with the president's son, Donald Trump Jr. We are able to bring you these kinds of conversations. We're allowed to bring you these facts because of you, because you all subscribe and you support what we're doing at the Daily Wire. So today, we're very happy to offer you a 47% presidential deal on annual memberships. We want to thank all of our current members. We want to welcome a lot of new members, and we want to honor the man who will be our 47th president. This limited time offer gives you access to uncensored, hard-hitting conservative content you will not find in the establishment media. Go to dailywire.com, join us in the fight. Use promo code FIGHT to save 47% on your Daily Wire membership. Donald Trump Jr.
Good to be with you.
Don, thank you for being
here.
Thank you. It's 6:03 p.m. on Saturday. Your father takes the stage. Take me from there.
I wasn't there. I was actually going to be there. I was supposed to be there because I actually thought that's when they were going to do the VP announcement. And so when I found out it wasn't going on, it was still being negotiated or talked about and whatever it may be, sort of a long couple of weeks. I was like, you know what? I'm going to be in Milwaukee. I'm going to be doing nonstop press and media. I'm taking the afternoon off instead of campaigning because I'm going to have pretty much a long sprint till November. Yeah. My daughter calls me, hey, can we go fishing? That doesn't usually happen. She's the golfer, so she's always training and practicing and competing and whatever. So it's like, yes. Took my daughter out on the boat with a couple of her friends. We went out fishing, and I got a call, 6:15, whatever it was. Your dad's been shot. And any other information? No, we don't know anything. Obviously, I immediately get on the phone. I try to call. I guess at that point, they're not sure what the attack is, so they lock down all the cell phones and they jam whatever it may be. I couldn't get through to anyone, and so literally 90 minutes before I even made contact. I obviously got back in, got all my kids together, made sure everything was secure, and I'm just literally waiting for a phone call to get even any information. Finally, I got a hold of my father, and surprisingly, calm in the hospital, and by then I'd already gotten seen the video and sort of him coming up, defiant in the face of actual fire. It was sort of amazing, and he just sort of said, hey man, you're the biggest badass I know, and because I genuinely believe that.
Yeah, of course.
Everyone thinks they're tough until they're actually put in a situation. He actually wasn't. To come out that way was sort of the most proud I'd ever been of him.
So you're on the fishing boat with your daughter, having a lovely, we were baptizing my youngest son that morning, and so very festive. And I saw a text come through, shots at Trump rally. Then I see a text, Trump shot. Then I get a phone call, get to the studio. No one knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, had your father been assassinated, it could have led to civil war.
Oh, I mean, yeah. The amount of, honestly, Michael, what's really interesting, sort of the amount of reasonable people I know that are, professionals and, successful and that are so frustrated with the world we are. Like, imagine the people who are getting crushed by this economy. And there's I think that, that's not, it's not an exaggeration. It's not like, I think that could very well be real. And I'm not encouraging that, and neither are you, because someone's going to say, but like,
but there's civil unrest for a lot less.
I think that's a very real thing.
Well, and the reason I even mention it is, so much depends upon a 15-degree turn of the head. When I went back, obviously you weren't getting any information for 90 minutes. Everyone's trying to say, he just turns his head like a nanosecond before the shot is fired. And so I think, I'm just a man who admires your father. I'm just a man who supports his campaigns. You're his son, and you're watching this happen, and you think, but for the grace of God.
Yeah. By the way, total I can't think of anything other than divine intervention, right? I don't believe in that much luck or coincidence anymore. That was amazing. And by the way, I'm also I come from a competitive shooting background. I mean, a 140-yard shot. That's like a 6-inch putt, right? That's almost impossible to miss. And so to be able to move that way and that it just at that exact instant, literally at the speed of a bullet,
So to what do you attribute it? It is you mean that literally divine intervention?
Oh, I mean,
I do. I certainly.
Yeah, and I'm not not a hyper spiritual guy. It's not, but man, that makes you wonder. I kept just watching a sort of once, sort of actually remarkably calm for the first, till I actually spoke to him, and then I finally, got my kids settled and tried to, I'm trying to explain to a 10-year-old that her grandfather was just shot in the face. These are conversations you hope to never have to have, even if it sort of worked out, in a good way. But you're doing that, then you actually sit down and sort of that, the adrenaline dump hits you, and it was just like, just.
Were you speaking to your siblings while this was?
Yeah. That the call to my father. I couldn't get through. Finally, I got through to my brother. He's like, hey, I just got through. Puts me on speakerphone, so it's me and my brother. Kim was there, my ex-wife was there, my kids are there. Like everyone's sort of, most of the family's just on speaker. I'd spoken to Ivanka a few seconds before that. We're just on speakerphone, talking to him. He was just, very calm, collected. It got to the point where it was like almost, you sort of needed that icebreaker. So I'm usually the inappropriate guy. So I was like, how's the hair? How's the hair, Dad? He goes, the hair's fine, but it's a little bloody. There's a little blood in the hair, but the hair's fine. So we had a little moment of levity there. But it was a somber moment.
And then what's so striking? I just got here to the RNC. You've obviously been here a little bit longer. There's this feeling of, it seems like jubilance or a lot of gratitude. A lot of people, obviously, this is what...
I'm seeing grown men in tears.
Yeah, I got misty-eyed.
It's amazing, actually. And it's such a contrast. Honestly, 2020 was sort of, digital. It didn't, it was remote. So it wasn't there. But in 16, it was very different.
Yeah.
I almost got in a fist fight on the floor with a senator because, they were, he happens to be a good friend of mine now, but at the time he was a Ted Cruz guy and he didn't know what we were coming in. It was with Mike Lee. And now he's one of my favorite senators. He's a great guy, actually. We hang out. But literally about to get in a fist fight with a U.S. senator on the floor of the convention, and people didn't know.
Now he looks even tougher with that shaved head.
Yeah, the shaved head and stuff like that. Just wiry. I think I can take him. But
it's a very different.
But it's different, Then I get it. You had this sort of unknown entity that was, not a DC guy, wasn't in politics, wasn't this, that sort of took it by storm. A lot of people make a lot of money in politics and have a lot of vested interest. They're not sure what's going on, and so walking in there the other day was just blown away. The support is amazing. You're literally seeing, even just for me, grown men, you see them go to shake your hand and you just see them well up, and it's like,
history does seem to touch people, in that I voted for your father happily in 2016. I voted for him happily again in 2020. I was going to vote for him happily again this time. It does seem that this is different now, that this is even more significant than it was. I wonder, in your mind, maybe in your father's mind, does the assassination attempt change anything about the campaign or about the vision for 2024?
Yeah, I think, once you get shot in the face, it puts things into perspective perhaps a little bit different. And so, I imagine it certainly does. I know, on Friday, the day before he was shot, I spent 4 hours with my father going through his speech, and, let's just say, that's been thrown away and, starting from scratch. It's just a different tone. Now, my father's, I just did this thing with Axios, and well, is he going to be? I was like, I think you can tone someone down, but if you're also constantly attacked, what makes Trump successfully is that he fights back. He doesn't just take those things, right? So, he's always going to be a fighter. That doesn't mean you can't, change a tone most of the time. You're still going to be out there. I sort of dealt with this. The one negative experience I had on the floor yesterday was a MSNBC reporter. I mean, I'm out there with my brother. We're literally throwing him over. We're giving the 125 Florida delegates. We're throwing my father over, so he's actually the nominee, and it's about to go official. And the guy starts off, so with all your father's hatred and this, is he bringing that back? I go, hatred and chaos? Wasn't that created by you guys? I mean, you guys were the ones that pushed Russia collusion. You're the ones that vilifies half the country. You're the ones calling us Nazis and fascists, and he's the biggest threat to democracy in the world. I'm like, that was you, not him. I mean, if he responds, you have to respond to that. You can't be called a traitor and not respond. And then he goes off on, well, he put children in cages. I go, you mean the Obama cages?
Right.
And he loses his mind.
Right.
And I just said, you know what?
Get out of here.
You're a clown.
Yeah.
I can say you're a clown. You couldn't even wait 48 hours to go back to your DNC talking points, to your nonsense. You couldn't even do 48 hours after my father was shot in the face. So, I guess the clip went fairly viral, but they can't control themselves. It's miraculous, and we're never gonna change the tone responding to that kind of idiocy.
No,
nor should we.
I'm sure you saw a lot of the clips of prominent liberals, leftists,
brutal, yeah.
of campaign and
Hollywood types and
political flacks and Hollywood types celebrating at first and then saying, doggone it, next time they better not miss.
Far too much of it. If that was coming from our side, those people they'd be thrown out of polite society. They'd be canceled, and probably rightfully so. It's one thing to have an opinion; it's another to do that. So, even in the face of that, they can't help themselves.
You and your father and your whole family have been, I think, extraordinarily gracious in the last 72 hours. If I were you, and a man, President of the United States, spent years calling my father Hitler, saying that he admires Nazis, that he, in a way, is a Nazi, or at least resembles them, and that he poses an existential threat to democracy, and then my father was nearly murdered?
Let's just say...
I won't even finish my sentence.
I showed what would be probably an uncharacteristic level of restraint, given what was going through my mind at that time. But, I guess that's the response they're trying to elicit anyway, so I'm not going to satisfy that. That urge, though, it would have felt great.
Yes. And I saw an interview with the current president trying desperately after, really, I guess this began with that disastrous debate performance, and then now his campaign's collapsed. But he lost his train of thought, and he said, well, my generic point is, and he
the thing.
Held off. You know the thing. And then it occurred to me, well, of course he can no longer articulate any point of the campaign, because the point of the campaign, he said from the beginning, I am running because Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, an existential threat to our country. If he can't say that anymore after that kind of language has led to certain incidents, what's he going to say?
Well, it's not like they can campaign on the economy. It's not like they've created world peace. They've created more wars than anyone in modern history, and allowed them to happen. And and that's the reality, right? When you exude weakness, the world sees it. Enemies attack. I will say it's it's sort of the nature of predation, right? Predators prey on the weak. When America is being led by a dolt, of course it's going to happen. That's why we're in these wars. That's why it's not ever going to stop. It's insanity. And so I'm sure they'll be back to that. Because no one out there in the media is going to hold them accountable. They all feel the same way. But it's nonsense, because nothing screams democracy like trying to jail your political opponents, to bankrupt them, to fine them, and
put them in dangerous situations. And by the way, again, it's the whole thing is it's absolutely crazy. I mean, they're going to lose that talking point for about a week, but I'm sure they'll be right back at it after their convention, and the media will let it slide, or they'll come up with some sort of way to justify it because they either believe it or it's convenient. There's a bill right now in the House of Representatives pushed by someone named Benny Thompson, a Democrat congressman from Mars, I think. I'm not sure exactly where this guy's from. One of his staffers was among those who wished that the shooter would hit next time. This bill would deprive your father of Secret Service protection. It was obviously designed strictly to target him. So that's still sitting in Washington, D.C.
It's still sitting in Washington, D.C. His staffer said those things. What do we think they actually think? I mean, they're right there with the Hollywood people. They may not say it out loud, but their staffers have, and it's crazy. And again, it's not like they've presented anything that's great for the American people, or I can't think of a metric. Hey, I was a real estate developer before all of this insanity. That was a lot easier. I used to say, I'm not getting attacked every day by the press and all this. Now, we're also not getting shot at for it.
Yeah.
And so I'd love for them to be successful. I'd love for that as a father of 5 young kids. I want them to grow up in America that recognize it. So I'd love not to have to be in that game, but we have no choice because they're failing on, across the board.
Right.
It's an abject disaster. I think everyone sees it, and it's why. It's why I'm seeing so many, frankly, people who are not Republicans, who are not from the demographics you'd think, that come up to me on a daily basis and be like, okay, I was wrong, we've had enough. We've had enough.
Right.
Please, get back at it.
It's a good point you make, too, because you often hear this from Republican politicians. They say, I wish I didn't have to be in politics. And they all want to be in politics.
Yeah, of course.
But when it comes from you guys, the Trump family has been very rich and famous since before I was born. Yeah. So, in a sense, it rings much truer because you really could just have a very comfortable, pleasant life, And,
yeah, I was joking with my father. He's the only person who ever sent to the presidency who actually, got a downgrade to public housing. It's obvious.
And transportation.
Yeah, it's a little tongue in cheek, but not really wrong. I mean, it's
right.
It's
right.
It's fine, but it's.
But you've had this past career, real estate developer, obviously helping run the Trump Organization, TV. Yeah. Now, though, you are a political advisor, and just yesterday, the VP pick was announced.
Yeah.
I think it was an excellent pick, a pick that I had been rooting for, and I know a pick that you had been rooting for, if the reports are to be believed. So
those reports are true.
And those reports are true. Great.
A lot of fake news, but those are not false.
So you saw something in J.D. Vance early on. Maybe some of your father's other advisors liked other people. Why J.D.?
Well, first of all, I've gotten to know him over the last couple of years, but I read his book when it first came out, and I was like, that's a guy you need in politics. Like the hillbilly elegy, the story of just coming from literally Appalachia and just growing into a business, and it just one after the other. I loved his military service, but it was right out of high school military service, not like, okay, I'm a consultant at McKinsey, and now I'm going to go check that box so that I can run for office one day. And it's like it's like a different motivation when you're doing it in high school before you know what direction you're going with anything else. But seeing the reality is seeing the way he'll go on CNN and MSNBC, and he'll go into hostile territory and just destroy these people. I mean, he does a better job in hostile territory prosecuting the case for sort of the America First movement, for MAGA, than the best Republicans do on Fox News when they're pitching T-ball. And I'm just that's a guy that can resonate. He can break through. When you talk about sort of the Rust Belt and you talk about sort of the electoral map, this is someone who can play in there. And it's interesting because all these, so many of the haters, and you got to remember, even a lot of the political advisors, they're on someone's payroll and no one knows, so they tell my father something, but they omit the important details.
Right.
They tell him just enough to get the answer that they want, but not the right answer.
Of course.
Politics is a disgusting game. I was dealing with that for the last couple of months as it related to this. I'm like, well, did you know this? I was like, no one told me that. I'm like, seems like a big one. He goes, what's going on? It's so sick. And that's all from our side, frankly.
Right. These are lobbyists for other candidates.
You had sort of the trillionaire faction of the party. The neocons. Yeah. You had the rhinos, and it's like. And my father's a guy that will listen to everyone. He'll give everyone a sort of a seat at the table and chant. But when they're just so flagrantly lying, and they have an agenda, or they're being paid to basically lobby for someone, even if they'd be terrible. It's just filtering through that. So I think it's just a huge win for America First. I think it's a huge loss for the warmongers in Washington, D.C. I couldn't be more psyched.
I also love that it's oriented toward the future. I mean, J.D. Vance is decades younger than your father, obviously almost 40 years younger, I think. Yeah. So, your father could have picked someone around his age, just kind of a wallflower, balance out the ticket or something. But he didn't. He picked a guy who's got really formed views, who's very intelligent, very articulate, young, energetic. So what your father and your whole family have done to the Republican Party has been reported as a change, a radical departure. In some ways that's true, but I think of it more as a restoration of the Republican Party. In those early days, on things like trade, on things like immigration, on things like foreign policy, the Trump view is actually a more traditionally conservative view than much of what we've seen in recent decades. So tell me if I'm wrong. It seems to me the JD pick is 2028, 2020, 2032, 2036.
That for me, as someone with young kids, again, I want to have a country we recognize. I don't want it to be, well, it was MAGA for 4 years and then we went back to the old ways.
Yeah.
So I love that you can have a guy that can, be a leader in that movement going forward, who can carry that torch, not someone who's like, okay, 4 years of peace and prosperity, back to war, because there's no money in peace for the swamp creatures, and so. That's so critical for me. So, I want this to be, a 12-year run of that, and then we'll figure out whoever's next. But, I think you're right. You're going back to the ways, but more importantly, I think you're going back to actually listening to your constituents. So many of these guys in Washington, they get voted in to, prosecute the case for their people. Then they get to D.C. and then they do the opposite of what their people want, and then, they change their tune around election time, and then they go back to do it. And, just having someone who's actually willing to fight for the will of the people who put them into office, rather than just take the easy route and just conform to the swamp is, I think that's a really huge deal as well, and that's something that's been missing from our party. And I think there was an apathy from our voters even when they see it. It's like, I know it's not even worth. Trump changed that. I think this gives sort of Trumpism, MAGA, America First, however you want to call it. A real great, leg into the future.
So, speaking of personnel, I'm not asking you to cast your father's administration, the number 47, but surely some people come to mind that you could envision being important leaders.
Yeah, I think, I've always said, hey, I want to be on the transition team, but it's not to put a single person into power. It's to stop the scumbags from ascending to power, right?
Just as important as putting people.
Well, more important.
Maybe more
I think
important.
Listen. Yeah. I think the guys that sort of tell you what you want to hear, but then do the opposite, or slow roll something, or in politics, in business, it was always like you sort of understand what people's motivation is, right? Whether it's wealth creation or money, whatever. Like you kind of understand where they're at. So in politics, it's like people will sell out their cause to get a good story written about them that they'll leverage into some sort of other next position that they're, ultimately leads to a board seat at Raytheon. That's all crazy. My whole thing is like, I just want to stop the scumbags. And now that we've been in there for 4 years, and more importantly, now that we've even had 4 years out, watching how people react, see how they are as it relates to, my father and the movement and the people once they think, hey, well, Trump's out of it, 2021, 2022. So they go back to the old ways. It's like, that's a guy that's just telling me what we want to hear. Let's just make sure they don't have a seat at the table.
It's a great point on politics and business. Not that I have a lot of business experience. I think you've had considerably more. But I have a cigar company, a few other things. Yeah. And I noticed I was in politics first, and then I have this little cigar company. And in business, you just incentives line up, and you just kind of figure it out, and it's good for you.
It can be vicious, but not like politics.
There's a lot more to get into. First, I want to take a moment to thank our friends over at Good Ranchers. In November, we all know we're going to cast our vote for the next president. Truth is that we vote with our dollar every day, especially in the grocery store. That is why you need Good Ranchers. Did you know that over 85% of grass-fed beef is imported from overseas? Stop casting your vote for foreign meat at the grocery store. Good Ranchers is the #1 source for 100% American meat delivered to your door. They sell the best beef, chicken, pork, and wild-caught seafood the U.S. has to offer. Every box is only filled with cuts from local, family-friendly farms in the U.S. And right now, Good Ranchers is offering you the chance to save up to $150 when you subscribe to any box of their 100% American meat. I had delicious Good Ranchers sirloin and New York strip 2 nights ago. Then the next morning, I had more New York strip and I think maybe ribeye with my eggs for breakfast. It's absolutely magnificent. You trust the Daily Wire for transparent news. You can trust Good Ranchers for transparent and trustworthy meat. They source all their meat from local U.S. farms. Head on over right now, goodranchers.com. No promo code needed. GoodRanchers.com, subscribe to any box, $150 off. The federal bureaucracy is something like 2 million people.
Yeah.
Any given president can replace 4,000 to 5,000 of them.
Yeah, the Plum Book is like 4,000 jobs.
So you really, what would you have to replace? 40 to 50,000 to start to get a handle on things. You don't need to answer, of course. There were a lot of. I think there were 40,000 people who ran for president in 2024, and so you got a lot of candidates. Do some people come to mind?
You know, I think you definitely do. You ultimately need people who are tough enough to actually go in there and not get enveloped by that bureaucracy. The people who are tough enough to try to get rid of some of the bureaucrats who are, not the elected or appointed positions, but the people that have been in there forever, that slow everything down, create the bureaucratic red tape in Washington, D.C. that have no outside experience. So I'd love to bring in a lot of people, frankly, from the outside who have been successful outside of the swamp, not creations of it.
Yeah.
And so, I think there is a lot of talent, I think, that'll be willing to do that now, much more than they would have in 2016, right? It's not no longer verboten to say, I'm having leftists that I know, sending me pictures. I'm seeing people wearing MAGA hats in San Francisco. It's just a change. I think people have watched the last few years. They understand our government's failed us across the board. And so, to have people who aren't just creations of that, I think there's a lot of people I'd go from the business space and otherwise that that I think we would certainly look at to head up some of these things, to have a change, to have a different perspective, because the same old sort of Washington D.C. groupthink hasn't served us all that well.
Of course, it's amazing. I'm even kind of stepping out of myself here in this conversation, in that we're having, for the last 5 minutes, a very normal conversation about politics. Oh, we'll replace these people or others. When, less than 3 days ago, American history almost took a major turn. The thing that got me to think of it is, you say, there are new people who are attracted to us. And I wonder, to what is that attributable? Is it because Biden's been a total failure and pretty much everyone recognizes it, including Democrats? Is it because your father destroyed Biden at that debate and it was just very clear what the options are? Is some of it because, despite all the hot rhetoric that we've seen, people actually had to come to terms with the fact that there might have been a world into 2024 without Donald Trump, and it changed their view?
I think all of those things. I think the response under fire, coming back defined. It's sort of that screams America, right? That's. And again, everyone's a badass on the internet these days. We sort of covered that. That's everyone's a tough guy. Everyone's behind a keyboard. Everyone's a tough guy. After getting shot, to still be a tough guy, that says something. I mean, that's the kind of leadership that keeps us out of wars. That's the kind of leadership and resolve that stops despots from invading their neighbors. That's so critical, and it's so clear that it's missing right now. So I think people get that, but it's just across the board. I'm the son of a billionaire from Manhattan, Michael. If I go to McDonald's with my kids, I took my two sons this summer. It's like $48.
Yeah,
it's like me and an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I was like, if I have sticker shock at McDonald's. I'm not saying it's changing my habits. I'm not one of these, the leftists where they do my 2-year-old was crying about nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula. I'm like, it didn't happen. If I'm pissed off at McDonald's because I think it's too expensive, it's a problem.
That's a problem.
Everyone gets it. Now they've had, it's also different than most politics where you're used to, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to create world peace, and everyone's going to be a billionaire. We've had 4 years, or will have had 4 years under both presidents when we vote. When were you better off? When was your life on a better trajectory?
Right.
It's sort of a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
It's funny because, as you say all of that, I think that picture of your dad getting up and saying, fight, 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 and then now it's an overused word, but it's apt here, and it's an iconic photograph with the
that's going to make the mugshot look like some kid drew it with a crayon. You
know what
I mean? It's totally, it really, I thought that was pretty damn iconic.
It could have been painted by, a Renaissance paint. It could have been, done by Michelangelo.
Sort of the Sistine Chapel of modern photography.
Modern politics. But so that is what would get me. As I've heard some people say, I was already going to crawl over broken glass. Now I'm going to eat broken glass. But for a lot of people, I suspect it's also those kitchen table issues. The fact that you have to take out a second mortgage to go to McDonald's now, and all the rest of it. Biden has really had no response to this. I think this is why you hear all this rhetoric about how Trump's, the worst person ever, big threat to the democracy, whatever. Biden says he spoke to your father after the shooting. Do you have any insight into that?
You know what? I actually don't. It's
better that way.
Yeah, I don't want to. I'll get subpoenaed. I've done 50 hours of congressional testimony for treason. I understand I'm not the upstanding citizen that Hunter Biden is. I know that. I'm a terrible human being according to.
When are you going to be invited to a Ukrainian?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Hunter can be running things de facto behind the scenes at the White House, and no one has a problem with that. But if
I've heard that rumor.
But if I heard a conversation even in the background, I'll get subpoenaed and be testifying. So I rather not know. So I actually have no insight into it whatsoever.
If your father's public statements are representative of his private statements, I'm sure he was very gracious on the call. I might not have been if I were in his shoes.
Yeah. No, listen. Again, it's you got to question. So much of that, right? How's a shooter get inside of 150 yards?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that's just a little lapse. And again, I'm not going to be the guy that gets conspiratorial, but I don't think it's conspiratorial. It's just abject fact, right?
How
it's
did
abject
it happen?
Fact. How does that happen?
We now hear that the Secret Service detail has been beefed up around your father. But my question is, why did it have to be beefed up?
Correct.
Why was it?
And again, I know what these guys do. I had one for 4 years when my father was a thing. I've watched it for 8 years. And, more importantly, even if he's been the presumptive nominee for a while. Right? He was certainly the presumptive nominee on Saturday.
He was the presumptive nominee in January of 2021.
So, makes you ask some questions, right?
It certainly does.
So I hope that, I hope there's people actually pushing to get those real answers, because as let's call it calm but really, really pissed off son.
Yeah.
Kind of want to know.
There was another former Republican president had a line in a different context where 20 years ago he said that he was filled with a quiet, unyielding anger.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt
like
seeing these things play out, and I'm sure you felt it 10 times over. The Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, says he has 100% confidence in the director of the U.S. Secret Service. The director of the Secret Service says...
Yeah, he thinks the border's shut down.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
I don't think anything that Alejandro Mayorkas says is true or means anything. I don't take it...
Right.
It means nothing to me what he says, because I think he's just a liar.
And
he's done more damage, killed more people probably than any person in American history with what he's allowed to happen down at that border between just the crime, between the gangs coming through. So honestly, whatever he says means nothing to me.
Yeah, fair.
But I also want an investigation that's not led by the FBI, because I don't think that anything that they would do would be,
right,
unbiased or
When I heard this from
sort of like O.J. searching for the killer, just working in a circle, right? It's a little, it's like, come on, guys, you're the guys that think that concerned mothers at PTA meetings are the greatest domestic terror threat in America, but...
And that spied on your father's first campaign.
Yeah, of course. My father was right. And then they remember the outrage of that. He goes, man, because my dad's a business guy. He's like, it just seems on. Like, the only way we get to this fact set if this is going on. How dare you say that? Oh, it turns out they were. All the conspiracy theories turn out to be 100% true, usually 3 or 4 years later.
Right. When Mayorkas came out, and I agree with you, if Mayorkas told me the sky's blue, I'd start to question. But the Secret Service director then also came out and she said, the buck stops with me, I'm responsible, but I have no plans to quit my job.
Yeah, because, again, they say all these things, but it's government, there's no accountability, it's never anyone's fault, there's always an excuse. I know they have an incredible, DEI hiring policy for, let's make sure we, like the rest of, our military, we wonder why there's a recruitment crisis, because, people don't exactly want to sign up when they're being led by an admiral that is only there because they checked off the boxes. It's, I get
Yelling
it.
about white rage.
It doesn't feel like, I never even heard of white rage, but I was like, once I heard that, I was like,
starting to
I'm
feel
white
it.
and I have rage. So I guess now I know.
Yes.
Now I know, but, it's insane what's happening in our country, and I think people just want to return to normalcy, to common sense, which is not at all common anymore. And I think we have a great chance to do that.
I agree. I think I think really everyone here is channeling what easily could be rage. If it were on the left, it would be expressed as rage, into something really productive, really beautiful, I think really grateful, and focused on the future. At 24, 28, 32, 36.
Like
Much more to
that,
talk
like that
about.
meme. It just
right.
kept going, and the left is just the crying. It's just
40,
you know,
44.
yeah.
Yes. Don, you've got a lot of people to talk to. Thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
sitting down.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
God bless.